One.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Todd's Inheritance Historic Site. I'm Ross Kimmel on the Board of Directors. We're a nonprofit foundation. If you're here to join the organization, see one of the ladies out of the glass counter. We'll also gratefully accept any of your donations. Now, it's my very great pleasure to introduce a historic Santa Claus to you. He comes each year here to greet the kids, but he always comes in one of the costumes from the historic past. You know, Santa Claus goes all the way back to about the year 300, 400.
272 AD was my birthday.
St. Nicholas. But in the Civil War, he visited the troops dressed in a patriotic Santa suit. And that's what he's wearing today. So I'm going to introduce him and let him tell you about his experiences with the soldiers in the Civil War.
Well, Merry Christmas and welcome to the Christmas holiday season. I would like to read a little something, actually two things. This is the hue and cry after Christmas, but it's good old Christmas gone, nothing but the hair of his good gray old head and beard left. Well, I will have that, seeing as I cannot have more of them. And also Washington Irving would write about old Christmas. Now Christmas is come. Let us beat up the drum and call all our neighbors together. And when they appear, let us make them such cheer as that will keep out the wind and the weather. And I heard it was quite breezy here on the point yesterday. So, well, we actually talked about Christmas last year and many of the things leading up to the Civil War. We see by the beginnings of the 19th century the image of St. Nicholas going from religious to more secular clothing, especially when we had The Children's Friend, a Christmas story that came out in 1821, a New Year's present for children from 5 to 12, and where I am just traveling by one reindeer. And then 2 years later, the editor of a newspaper in Troy, New York, the Troy Sentinel, along with a couple other newspapers there, but this editor, who has the unlikely name of Orville L. Holly, will receive in the mail a poem. So he writes an editorial for this poem, in which he would write, "We know not to whom we are indebted for that following description of that unwearied patron of children, Santa Claus, as he goes about the firesides of this happy land, laden with Christmas bounties, but from whomsoever it may have come, we give thanks for it." And then he is the one who entitles it, being an account of a visit from St. Nicholas, with those legendary lines, "'Twas the night before Christmas went all through the house." Now, one of the interesting tidbits here that only the real Santa would know, the names of the reindeer. They're all females. There's not a male among them except for the latecomer Rudolph, because the females have a nasty, or the males have a nasty habit of in the dead of winter dropping their horns. So it's only the females that retain them. But also they were named after famous racehorses of the time period. So we have Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, and then there were two others that had distinctly different names than they have come down today. And that was Dunder and Bliksem, which is Dutch for thunder and lightning. I mean, lately and later on, some of the punctuation gets changed and the way they call the reindeer, but also the two reindeer names are changed too. They become the Germanic Donder and Blitzen, which is also for thunder and lightning. There was two people that may have possibly written that poem. First is the one who has the main claim to it, which is Clement Clarke Moore. And it was his estate in the borough of Chelsea that New York will spread out on. So he sort of makes a lot of money off of real estate when he sells his family estate of Chelsea, which today you can find a plaque in the borough of Chelsea on an apartment building that this was where Clement Clarke Moore's home once stood. Now his father was the Episcopal priest of New York City, and his claim to fame was he was the one, after declining to do so, gave the last rites to Alexander Hamilton after his fateful duel with Aaron Burr. So, but then we have many other changes too. I go from being a very skinny Santa to, by the time I get to the 1830s, we have an artist at West Point. And I can't think of his name just this second, but he will teach such future Civil War luminaries as Thomas Jonathan Jackson, later to be known as Stonewall, U.S. Grant, Thomas Sherman, too, and James McNeill Whistler, the one who will paint Whistler's mother, which is actually, he's got another title to it. I think it's Designs of Black and Grays. But he leaves the country after dropping out of West Point because he has too many demerits, and so he will go overseas, never return to this country again, but become a very famous painter in his own right. So in the 1830s and 1840s, many of the German immigrants coming to this country will be introducing the decorated wonders of the Christmas tree to many of the metropolitan centers. In fact, in 1851, the very first Christmas tree dealer arrives in New York City to sell Christmas trees to the German population. So he procures Mark Carr, whose property is from the mountains up there, will procure for $1 the street corner of Vesey and Greenwich Streets. But he sells out his entire stock to more than just the Germans, so it's becoming more than just an ethnic prize of Christmas. So the following year he comes back with even more, and by the time we get to the 1870s, there are more than 600 Christmas tree dealers in New York City. The very first Christmas tree dealer in Philadelphia happened to be a woman. But anyhow, we have all this going on, and then with the president, Franklin Pierce will have the first decorated Christmas tree in the White House. Eventually, under the administration of Grover Cleveland, the one who had the presidency that had been interrupted instead of having 8 years altogether, he hasn't interrupted like the president that we are getting ready to have now, too. But he has the first electrically lit Christmas tree in the White House, too. And even during Lincoln's administration, during the Civil War, he will go downtown to the local toy store and buy toys for his children, and has a Christmas tree in the White House, too. But interestingly enough, also, in 1861, the first Christmas tree, cover on the pages of Harper's Weekly happened to be drawn by Winslow Homer, and it shows soldiers gathering around a Christmas box, which was something that many soldiers, both North and South, would ask for at Christmas time. And it would contain the wealth of the home front pantry with hams and chickens and cakes and pies and turkeys and all kinds of good stuff from the pantry, as well as the industrious fingers of the women, both North and South, of mothers and daughters and sisters and girlfriends sewing shirts, underwear, socks, mittens for the hands and all that, and the soldiers would get their Christmas boxes. So we see what is coming in the Christmas boxes is they're pulling out socks and books and all kinds of good things. And in the background there was a sutler tent, and he's doing no business today selling his highly inflation prices on the goods that he has, because everything is coming into camp for free. Also in 1861, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens is also being introduced into the pages of Harper's Weekly that called itself the Journal of Civilization. Many of the big books of that time period, Wilkie Collins being another one who would write a number of ghost stories, would also be serialized within the pages, as well as the latest war news that's going on. In fact, Nass will join the pages of Harper's Weekly in 1862. And he would draw a number of images in which he would, as Lincoln would call him, the best recruiting sergeant that he had, for the pictures of this color bearer and things like that. But at Christmas time in 1862 will be his very first Santa Claus image, which I will show you presently. But we have a number of things going on, too. In fact, Christmas trees are becoming popular. I told you about that. In 1859, Charles Dickens would write about the Christmas tree that he was viewing. I've been looking on this evening at a merry company of children assembled around that pretty German toy, a Christmas tree. The tree was planted in the middle of a great round table and towered high above their heads, and it was brilliantly lighted by a multitude of little tapers. Everywhere sparkled and glittered with bright objects. There were rosy-cheeked dolls hiding behind green leaves, and there were real watches with movable hands at least, and the endless capacity of being wound up. Dangling from innumerable twigs, there were French polished tables, chairs, bedsteads, wardrobes, 8-day clocks, various other articles of domestic furniture, wonderfully made in tin at Wolverhampton, perched among the boughs as if in preparation for some fairy housekeeping. And there were jolly, broad-faced little men, much more agreeable in appearance than many real men, and no wonder. Their heads took off and showed them to be full of sugar plums. There were fiddles and drums, there were tambourines, books, work boxes, peep show boxes, and all kinds of boxes. There were trinkets for elder girls, far brighter than any grown-up gold and jewels. There were baskets and pincushions and all devices. There were guns, swords, and banners. There were witches standing in enchanted rings of pasteboard to tell fortunes. There were teetotums, humming tops, needle cases, pen wipers, smelling bottles, conversation cards, bouquet holders, real fruit made artificially dazzling with gold leaf, imitation apples, pears, and walnuts crammed with surprises. In short, as a pretty child her bosom friend said, there was everything and more. So we have all that going on, so going up into the war. So there were very few letters that were actually written during the Mexican-American War. There will be a lot more letters written by American soldiers, both Union and Confederate, as well as civilians on all sides of the conflict during the Civil War. It is now becoming a big holiday. In fact, at the very beginning, there were only 3 states, and 2 of them were Southern, that made Christmas a holiday, a state holiday. By the time we get to the eve of the Civil War, there are multiple northern states and southern states that are now declaring Christmas Day a holiday. And it'll be after the war that it becomes a federal holiday. Now, in 1861, we have the firing on Fort Sumter. So, and then we also had the cover of Winslow Homer showing the soldiers opening up a Christmas box. But we also have civilians and soldiers writing to Sally Brock Putnam of Richmond, Virginia in 1861. She will write in her memoirs that evenings at home, formerly spent in gaiety and social amusements, were made pleasant and useful in the labors of love and duty which prepared comfortable hose for the soldier, or a warm visor or fancy-colored scarf under the patronage of kind old Santa Claus found their way to the Christmas bag in the soldier's tent. Although it had become expedient to curtail numerous expenses to retrench in this necessary or to abstain from that, kind friends at home could not permit the sacred festival to pass by without some evidence of the former delightful manner in which it had been observed. If we sat down at a board less cheerful or less bountifully provided with creature comforts, care was taken that our own dear ones in the field should not realize it. An extra turkey, a rosy ham, a jar of pickles, a jug of eggnog, or a large golden pound cake were carefully prepared, secured in the strong box, and to which it found its way into nameless articles of cheer and comfort, entrusted to the patron saint of Christmas, who rarely failed to make his way amid whizzing balls, crashing and bursting shells, to the white tent with the luxurious dinner for the young soldier, who was debarred from taking it at the Homestead War. And then we also have a comic writer by the name of Orpheus C. Carr, which is a play on the word office seeker, which is the bane to the Lincoln administration, all the people seeking offices and positions as, mail clerks and things like that. He would write a weekly column in one of the newspapers, and right now his comic name, his real name, he was the contemporary of Artemus Ward and Miles O'Reilly, and published weekly letters in newspapers. Carr chronicled the misadventures of the Union's mackerel brigade. Something fishy there, I think. His Christmas reminiscences of his youth is full of puns. And he would write, "A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, my boy, and the same to yourselves. The reoccurrence of these gay old annuals makes me feel as ancient as the first families of Virginia, and as grave as a churchyard, sort of like the one we have out here. How well I remember my first Christmas. Early in the morning, my dignified paternal father presented me with a beautiful spanking. And my maternal mother touched me up with her slipper to stop me from crying. Sensible people are the women of America, my boy. They slap a boy in his upper end, which makes him howl, and then hit him on the other end to stop his noise. There's good logic in that idea, my boy. The first Christmas of mine was memorable from the fact that my present was a drum, on which I executed a new opera of my own composition with such good effect that in the evening, a deputation of superannuated neighbors and old maids waited on my father with a petition that he could send me to sea immediately. And then last but not least, for Christmas of 1861, we have a Confederate scribe, the mysterious scribe of the Orphan Gauge Company C of the 4th Kentucky. And he would write every day, render his loyal and patriotic feelings on Christmas Day in the clothing and book for Company C. And he would write, December 25th, 1861, the birth of Christ our Redeemer finds our country struggling in the holy cause of liberty with the vile hordes of robbers and assassins sent to burn and destroy by their master Abraham Lincoln, who occupies the chair in Washington. Oh, so we pass from 1861, we find out it is going to be a long war. In fact, it will be 4 years. But oh, there it is. In 1862, with Nast having been asked by his publisher, Mr. Harper, to show something showing the home front as well as what was going on in the war effort. So he not only does the front page, he also will do the centerfold spread too. But the front page would show this picture showing me dressed as I am dressed before you, in red, white, and blue, right there. And there I am passing out boxes to the soldiers. Those things contain the wealth of the home front pantry as well as those industrious fingers. And we see one soldier's pulled out a stocking here that has candy canes on them. We have other soldiers. And the thing that is a political propaganda for political purposes here shows me with this doll hanging from a rope. And that doll's name is Old Jeff, representing Jeff Davis of the Confederacy. And as the article says, Santa has tied that cord pretty tightly around Old Jeff's neck, and Jeff seems to be kicking very much at such a fate. But we also have the drummer boys have gotten the jack-in-the-box here. There is a product placement in here, and it says Old Santa has brought lots of Harper's Weekly, so both you and Lansing's can get a peek of the annual Christmas number, because he also did the centerfold too, which looked like a pair of binocular lenses. And in one, we have the wife who's praying before a cold, frosty window for the safe return of her husband. And in the other lens, he's in a cold picket camp with a little fire, looking at a glass photograph, or what they call an ambrotype, of his wife and kids, wishing he was at home enjoying the festivities. But the article starts out and says, children, you mustn't think that Santa visits you alone, for he also visits our soldiers in the field. And as also on the upper corners of the centerfold spread, there's a picture of me getting ready to jump down in a metropolitan setting, a chimney. On the other corner of the centerfold, me driving through this camp, throwing out the boxes and the soldiers gleefully running after them to gobble them up. So, and in the bottom we have a Christmas storm at sea, in fact on December 30th, the Monitor, one of the first ironclad battleships in the Civil War, who had its fated engagement with the CSS Virginia, or the Merrimack, as it would be called, would sink off the coast of North Carolina, and there would be a number of deaths. In fact, it now rests in a museum now. So, but we also have a battle that's going on. In fact, on Christmas Day in 1861, the Confederates will cross the Potomac River and try to break up the C&O Canal by attacking Fort Frederick, which is right there to also protect the canal. In fact, during the Revolutionary War, it was a Hessian prisoner of war camp. And there is evidence that a Hessian soldier may have introduced the Christmas tree back then. In fact, let me tell you, one of the very first evidences of my appearance appeared in a newspaper article in 1787 and mentioned me by name, Santa Claus. So we have all that going on. And we have that. But it was interesting because the Christmas Day of 1862, in the Confederate capital of Richmond, the editor of the Richmond Examiner writes an editorial in which he says, "We have nothing to chime about the non-arrival of Santa Claus because he's nothing more than a Dutch toy merchant, an inflated scrub from England and New England, and has nothing more to do with genuine Christmas merrymaking and Virginia hospitality than a Hottentot."
What?
You can imagine what he probably got for Christmas. And if it was cold, he was looking forward to that because his apartment was cold in Richmond that year. So we have that. But also getting to remember the names of the reindeer. You know, remember the last two? They were
Dunder and Blitzen.
Dunder and Blitzen.
Dunder.
Okay, so we have Brigadier General John W. Geary, who fought at the Battle of Cedar Mountain. And he's recovering from a wound he receives there, but he writes home and gives his daughter some fatherly holiday advice. And so from the 2nd Division 12th Corps headquarters at Fairfax Station, he would write, "My dear little pet, on this Christmas Eve, I have no doubt you've been enjoying yourselves, perhaps with toys of the season, eaten your nuts and cakes, hung up your stockings in the chimney corner for old Kris Kringle when he comes along with his tiny horses, Dunder and Blitzen, and his little wagon filled in lots and gobs of sweet things, sugar, candy, sugar plums, and if you please, sugar everything, enough to give a diabetic a coma." Well, when I was a little boy a good many years ago, I was fond of such things myself, and when I look back, they were indeed the happiest days of my life. Enjoy them, my little pet, they come but once. The boys, the 2 Willies, are getting too old for the enjoyment you can have when ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. I wish you a Merry Christmas and many of them. I must close, there's a lot of soldiers at my door giving me a serenade, perhaps of the latest Christmas songs that have come out, and I must give it some attention. And then we have another Union soldier who is with the 17th Maine Regiment. And so he talks about being out on a work crew on Christmas. And they spent the day before Christmas in a high state of anticipation because they expected parcels from home while they were out corduroying roads. And he would be the victim of a practical joke. It says, "It is rumored that there are sundry boxes and mysterious parcels over at Stoneman Station directed to us," Haley wrote in his diary. "We retire to sleep with feelings akin to those of children, expecting Santa Claus. We have become very childish in some of our matters, grub being one of them." On Christmas Day, upon returning from work detail, Haley's mate spun his joke upon the unsuspecting Haley. The day's work was only endured by the anticipation of what was in store in those boxes. So, on returning to camp, I was informed by my tent mate that there was no parcel at the station bearing my name. My mental thermometer not only plummeted below zero, it got right down off the nail and lay on the floor, which he had brought. Seeing this, my tent mate made haste to dive under the bed and produce the box, which he had brought from the station during my absence. In a few minutes, we were discussing the merits of its contents. Most of the men have been remembered, and any that have not received something from home are allowed to share with their more fortunate neighbors. In fact, many of these boxes would be compiled to make the company Christmas mess each year. Interestingly enough, in Fredericksburg, It's a very balmy day, so there's Indian wrestling, there's horse races, there's foot races, all kinds of things. In fact, the Irish Brigade will set up a Christmas tree in their camp, and they will hang hardtack and salt pork, especially the very dried salt pork. And they will also put their tin cups that they've been imbibing Christmas whiskey from. So later on, they go out and involved in some of the competition, and there will be a fight later on among them and another company. So there are black eyes, missing teeth, and a few bloody noses to be endured at the officers' camp. But in 1863, comes along, Nash will do the front page. In fact, there will be a lot on both the North and the South, a lot of asking of Christmas furloughs by the soldiers. Some of the soldiers, instead of asking for a furlough, just took one anyway, and off they ran. And later to come back, sometime to return later on after being AWOL. So, but the picture on the front page showed a soldier welcoming the loving embrace of his wife while his children are climbing up his leg, except for the one little girl. The little boy is climbing up Papa's leg, overjoyed to see Papa. But the little girl who's been born since Papa's been away in the army, not quite sure who this bearded stranger is. But there's a tabletop Christmas tree on the table in the background, and family and friends are also coming in the door, welcoming the veteran home. Underneath in the center, he's raising a toast to the sailors and soldiers of the armies and navies while having his last Christmas banquet before his furlough runs out and he has to run off. In fact, speaking of which, Major A.R. Small of the 16th Maine would talk about Christmas furlough activities, that a most invented application for a holiday furlough was detailed in the diary of Major A.R. Small of the 16th Maine. Applications for furloughs have been frequent of late. That Sergeant Major Maxfield sent his application based on Deuteronomy, 20th chapter, 7th verse. And what man is there that betrothed a wife and hath not taken her? Let him go and return unto his home, lest he die in battle, and another man take her. If approved, he says he shall ask for an extension, referring to Deuteronomy 24th chapter, 5th verse, which reads, When a man hath taken a new wife, he shall not go to war, neither shall he be charged with any business, but he shall be free at home 1 full year, and shall cheer up his wife which he hath taken. Much to his surprise, the sergeant major obtained his leave, while the application of 2 officers were disapproved. Hopefully he spent his leave under a sprig of mistletoe in the arms of his wife. In fact, in that picture, there is a sprig of mistletoe hanging up, and it's also a very Victorian border, too, that is also there. But also, Nash will do a triptych in the centerfold, which will show, in one, showing me peering over the sleeping forms of those 2 children that are in the main front page, and getting ready to fill their stockings, while in the others, family and friends that are off to church to welcome Christmas morning in. But also we see a Christmas army camp in the distance up on one of the top right hand, and we also see a metropolitan setting with the spires and so many churches in there. In the South, many Southern mothers are trying their first Christmas trees during the Civil War. But by the middle of the war, many of those same mothers are also telling their children not to expect me, because I won't be able to get through the blockade with all the Union ships firing on me, dressed like this. So the changes a year rot caused she tries her first Christmas tree in 1862. But she joins a multitude of Southern mothers telling their children not to expect anything from Santa Claus, as he would not be able to breach the ever-constricting blockade of the Confederacy in '63. Her children, nonetheless, abided their faith in the patron saint of children and hung up their stockings anyway. I have written nothing of Turner and Mary Bell's party, which I gave them last week in lieu of Santa Claus's present. Mary Bell has been told that Santa has not been able to run the blockade and has gone to war. Yet at the late hour when I went upstairs Thursday night of the party, I found the trusting faith of childhood. They had hung up their stockings anyway, in case Santa did arrive. I had given the subject no thought whatever, but invoking Santa Claus's aid, I was enabled when their little eyes were open to enjoy their pleasure to find a cake and some money in their socks when they woke up the next morning. So then we have all that. So in 1864 now, we have a picture of a family, all in the nursery. The family has been prodigious, producing offspring, but we have a teenager who's reading her first romance novel and reading all about love, while we have another girl who's gotten her first ABC picture book, so she's learning her ABCs, while another one's holding up a China bisque doll that also came on a sleigh, too. And they're building blocks and tea parties and all that. There's a boy, as many of you boys would get for Christmas, uniforms and wooden swords and wooden soldiers and drums, so you could play at being a soldier. So, or also we have the little girls holding up their dolls, too. So, but then the centerfold page will be one of propaganda purposes, because they're already planning at this late stage in 1864 that the Confederacy is starting to go up the spout, and the war will probably be ending with a number of months. So at Christmas time, we see a picture of Abraham Lincoln in the Hall of States, and we know it's the Hall of States because on the backs of the chairs that face your view are the initials of those particular states. And those states that do not have anybody sitting in those chairs have the initials of the southern states like Arkansas and Tennessee and various others. But we have soldiers there who are saluting a toast, and Lincoln is welcoming into the Hall of States because there are peace initiatives being floated at this time too on how to release parole prisoners and exchange them. But Grant will put a stop to that too. So, but we have General Lee, and we also have a number of others too. So, and coming into the States. So we also see in the background it says North and South together again. So they're already planning the reunion of the United States of America. So, but I am also in that picture if you ever get a chance to see, because it says the Union Christmas dinner. In the background, I am in shadow with my team of sleigh and my team of reindeer too. So, but in Christmas of 1864, outside in the trenches at Petersburg, John B. Gordon would write about his Christmas memories. His wife travels with him throughout much of the war. She'll be a pain in the behind to some of the Federal High Command, but she helps him to recover from his atrocious injury that he has at Antietam battlefield. He gets shot in the face and almost trapped. If he hadn't had a hole put in his hat, he would have drowned in his own blood. But he's there in 1864 as a rather respected officer. At my headquarters, he writes, on that Christmas day, there was unusual merrymaking. Mrs. Gordon, on leaving 4 years before, had placed in her little army truck a small package of excellent coffee, and had used it only on very special occasions to celebrate, as she said, our victories in the first years and sustain us in the defeat at the last. When I asked her on the morning of December 25th, 1864, what we could do for Christmas celebration, she replied, I could give you some of that coffee which I brought from home. She could scarcely have made an announcement more grateful to a hungry Confederate. Coffee, genuine coffee. The aroma of it filled my official family, and the Epicurean enthusiasm before a cup was passed from the boiling pot. If every man of us was not intoxicated by the indulgence after long enforced abstinence, the hilarity of the party was most misleading. So, Christmas of 1864 comes along. We go into 1865. But in April, we have the assassination of the current president, Abraham Lincoln. So the war comes to an end in April, as well as in May of 1865, and many of the armies are now standing down, and many of those are now being sent back home. So we have more than, in 1865, for Christmas of that year, more than 623,000 casualties on both sides. So all ethnic groups, Germans, Italians, African Americans who are joining the Union Army, and some that are working the building of fortifications for the Confederates too. In fact, there is a plan afoot to try and maybe emancipate maybe some of those black workers who would fight for the Confederacy and give them their freedom should the South win, but it comes to no fruition. So by the time we get to the 1865, there's the Nast will do the centerfold showing a picture of me up there holding a pipe, and in the other there's a picture of a boy and girl, a boy holding a kepi, and a girl holding her new doll. While down below we have soldiers we have the boys who are attacking a snow fort, trying to outflank the Confederates that are in the pretend Confederates. We also have visiting the churches and singing the latest Christmas carols that are coming out too. So, and we have a Merry Christmas to all. So, but it will also be, Nast will do also another, in 1866, he will do a centerfold showing me at the North Pole for the first time, because before that, I'd only been known to come from the land of snow and ice. Nobody knew. It might have been Lapland or Iceland or maybe Greenland or one of those places, but nobody knows. So in this picture, which is turned into a children's book later on, especially the images that surround it are colorized, we have Thomas Nast, who up here has the account book of good and bad boys and girls. And you can read some of the names in there, like Tom Thumb and his new wife at Barnum and Bailey's Museum. Down here, this is before the elves had come along, and I sew all the dolls' clothes myself. And here I am in the workshop making the wooden toys all by myself. It's not until the latter part of the century, when the explosion of children gets so big, that I will require help in order to be able to get my rounds ready for Christmas Eve. All right, for you ladies who like dolls, and there are a good many of you, which dolly would you have right here? And here is the doll's tea party, the doll's parlor here, and the doll's kitchen. Doll's parlor there, and the kitchen over here. And also in the background we see the myriad of toys that would have been available. Jack-in-the-boxes and dolls. Up here are wooden pool toys and tennis rackets. And here we have riding horses and things like that. We have wooden toy soldiers and baby rattles over here. We have those military goods you boys are requesting, knapsacks and kepis and wooden swords and ships and things like that. And we have, for putting creches underneath the Christmas tree, we have trees and fences and barns and animals to put in there too. So we have a pull toy steer and a dog, a rover and all that. And down below we see On My Christmas Eve Journey. And up here, the stockings say, Here He Comes. And in the center I have arrived with all kinds of good things underneath the Christmas tree. So this will set and then the last change to my image will come about in the early days of the 20th century, when an advertising artist by the name of Haddon Sundblom, who has Scandinavian roots, he has the account for a very famous soda pop, and he will do the annual canvas for Coca-Cola. So, and let me tell you a secret, how you can tell a regular Santa Claus image from a Coca-Cola image. A regular Santa Claus image will have fur all the way down and around. A Coca-Cola Santa Claus has brass buttons down the front, no fur, just on the bottom and on the cuffs. That's how you tell a Coca-Cola. So, and that goes from 1931 until he retires in 1964, but they have a couple more extra canvases that he painted during his career. So that goes on until 1966, and so occasionally they bring back the Haddon Sundblom with the cutouts in the grocery stores, which are highly sought after by collectors too. And of course, Santa Claus or St. Nicholas is advertising everything these days, from beer to on the image being put in on your plastic bags that you carry your gifts home from. So, well, I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, or the famous words of a visit from St. Nicholas. I heard him exclaim, ere he go and say, "Happy Christmas to you all, and to you all a good night." If you have any questions, I'll be happy.
You mentioned new carols coming out, like 1863,
No.
64. Do you know of any that were?
Yeah, hold on. I actually got a list in here. Bear with me here. One of the ones is an old children's one. You remember Up on the Housetop?
Yeah.
1860. Wow. Here we go. Now, American Christmas carols written and published before, during, and after the Civil War were Came Upon a Midnight Clear in 1850 by Richard Storrs Willis, and Unitarian minister Edmund Hamilton Sears, O Little Town of Bethlehem by Philip Brooke. In 1865, the words, and later on put the music by Louis Redner in 1868. Away in the Manger, the author is unknown but was credited to a German Lutheran in Pennsylvania and published in 1885. I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day started as a poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow because he had heard that his son had been grievously wounded. So these were his sentiments on hearing that news, but he found out later on he was only slightly wounded and was well on his mend. But he would write that in 1863, it would be set to the music of an existing tune. We Three Kings of Orient Arbor, written by Rector John Henry Hopkins Jr. in 1857. Up on the Housetop, also known in this century as Santa Claus, around 1860. And last but not least is the one Christmas carol that says nothing at all about Christmas. Jingle Bells, which was written by Reverend John Pierpont of Boston in 1856. Originally, it was published and titled as a one-horse open sleigh. It's a sparking song for riding with your best girl and your fastest cutter. So Pierpont would have a falling out with his congregation, and he would move south. And during the Civil War, he would marry the mayor of Savannah, Georgia's daughter, and would remain in the South during the war, writing patriotic tunes for the Confederacy. But he was also the uncle to future robber baron and mogul J.P. Morgan, which stands for John Pierpont. So there we have a whole bunch of those and many more. Of course, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer comes around in the 1840s, although Rudolph comes about in 1936 as a printed book by the Montgomery Ward's Company. And it's written by one of the employees, Robert May. In fact, he writes 2 Rudolph books because there's Rudolph's Second Christmas, which I also have a copy of too. But he doesn't make a penny from it. It's Montgomery Ward's that makes it all. But it was an annual holiday thing when Montgomery Ward's was the big department powerhouse along with Sears to hand that out to children at Christmas time along with coloring books and things like that. Some of you all are probably from Washington. My big thing that I remember was seeing the Christmas windows at Hecht's and Woody's and some of the other department stores down there because they were the moving windows that told a story as you walked around the block. So.
Santa, I think you have some children who want to see you.
Right,
So
back to business.
okay.
Yes, sir.
One quick question. The Christmas boxes, do they have problems getting them through the lines to get this open?
Well, actually, the Adams Express Company, which was famous for when Henry Box Adams sent himself by Adams Express to the north where he becomes free, because he drilled a number of holes. So Adams Express is a very big express company, and there are a number of other express companies, both north and south, that did ship. By the time we get to 1864, the railroads have been basically overrun by the Union troops, and they're cutting off, except for one railroad, what is able to come into the Confederacy for their Christmas festivities as well as New Year's, because supposedly the women of Richmond were supposed to be giving a New Year's Day feast, and so it only ended up to 1 or 2 units before it was all gone. So, and then they had to say, "I'm sorry, but we don't have any more." So, but yeah, all throughout the war, yeah, especially in the north too. So.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. I wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.